them to make sure that their message is still there to all Iraqi people, because they know there's a counter message coming from the United States trying to rally the Iraqi people for this war, in favor of this war. And the Iraqis are trying to counter it by saying that this attack by the United States, this invasion, is not targeting Saddam Hussein only, but targeting Iraqis and Iraq as a nation. And they're trying to appeal to every sector of the society, the tribes, the soldiers, the families. That's why when Saddam Hussein is on the air, he always refers to the tribe name of the Iraqis. He sometimes mentions even names of fighters who have been able to arrest U.S. soldiers or have downed U.S. planes in order to motivate people to rally around him. Carol?
And I know that perhaps the messages coming from Iraqi television has rallied some within Iraq, but how about the rest of the Arab world?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Carol, because the Arab world on the first night, when they saw the explosions taking place in Baghdad, their most concern was for the Iraqi civilians that this attack is actually destroying Baghdad, which is a very old Arab capital. In the minds of a lot of Arab people, it's a place that symbolizes the civilization of the Arab nation. And so many were concerned, many were sad. Afterwards, when the Iraqi television started showing pictures of their resistance, what they call the resistance, when they started putting pictures of U.S. prisoners of war, when they started putting these pictures of the U.S. downed planes, people in the Arab street became so focused on the Iraqis' resistance because many people did not expect the Iraqis to be able to resist such a might, the U.S. force, so many soldiers, so much sophisticated weapons. So many of them also know that many Iraqis are not happy with the regime there. They would like to see it removed. So they were surprised at the level of resistance. And now they're very focused on it. Every day you'll see many Arabs just hooked on the television, watching, waiting to hear more news of how the Iraqis are handling this war. Carol?
Rula Amin reporting live from Amman, Jordan this morning. Thanks.
And according to a story in the New York Times today, one of the ways the Iraqi irregular troops seem to be handling this war is by shooting some Americans who are taken prisoner. This is in the New York Times. Quoting U.S. officials who say this is based on one source, a communications intercept, but apparently they believe, at least this official believes, based on this one source, that at least some of the Americans taken prisoner the other day were shot, executed in some sort of a public forum. So that, I guess, is one of the ways that the Iraqis are handling this resistance. Chris Plant is at the Pentagon. He has more on the coalition missile strike on the building housing Iraqi TV, as well as other updates about the fighting. Chris, good morning.
Hi, Anderson. Just a point of clarification there. I think what the New York Times article is saying is that some of the people that were taken prisoner early on, we saw the videotape or still photos of some that were killed early on. I don't think we're talking about the 5 or 7 POWs that we've seen videotape of having been executed.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct.
Just a minor point of clarification. But Baghdad TV was knocked off the air by the U.S. coalition last night. Pardon me, Tomahawk land attack missiles and guided bombs from airplanes went in and took them off the air, they say, on their own timetable, the U.S. is saying. It's something that they had planned to do at a certain point. As Carol was saying earlier, it was a bit of a mystery that they didn't take them off the air the first night, which clearly they have the capability of doing. They say that they were learning things from Baghdad TV. They would see who would come out before the cameras, know who was alive and who was not, who was in command and who was not. So they said there was some value in leaving Baghdad TV up for the early stages of this fight, and that they took them off the air when it was convenient for them. Clearly, as we're seeing, they're back up on the air, but certainly if the U.S. is interested in knocking them off again, they will knock them off again. They have the technology to locate where the new transmitter is located, and they have high-speed anti-radiation missiles, for one, which home in on television broadcast signals and so on. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if their resurgence was short-lived. Anderson?
And Chris, I guess the information that U.S. officials were trying to glean, apparently, from Iraqi TV broadcast early on, they felt they could get some information, some intelligence from it, whether it was a question of who was suddenly showing up on Iraqi TV, I guess trying to determine who was alive and who was dead.
Well, that's right, and also, I mean, you'll recall that the POWs that we just mentioned were also seen on Iraqi TV first, and That was proof that they were alive. It now gives the United States the opportunity to keep the Iraqis' feet to the fire and the Red Cross regarding those particular POWs. So there was some value in allowing Iraqi TV to stay on the air. When they decided that that value had run out for whatever reason, they decided to knock them off.
Chris, has there been any reaction thus far from the Pentagon about this New York Times story? You know, I think anyone who is going to read this story today, it's very easy to get very upset by it.
Right. There has been no official reaction as of this time, but they certainly saw the videotape when it first aired, Baghdad TV, and then on Al Jazeera also. Some of us have also seen the whole tape. There were indications, certainly on the videotape, that they may have been executed. It wasn't necessarily conclusive, but there were also rumors flying around that they did execute some of the Americans in a public fashion, and apparently that's what the New York Times is hearing from intelligence sources also. But so far, no official response. I would expect that Secretary Rumsfeld and some of the other leaders here in the U.S. military will have something to say about that when they have the chance.
And just to clarify, this is a New York Times report that you can see, I guess, on NewYorkTimes.com. It's also, I guess, going to be in today's paper, but it basically quotes one official who says this information was based on one source only, apparently some sort of communications intercept, and they were trying to get more sources on it to find out whether in fact this was true.
Well, very often the case with intelligence information, particularly with intercepts, intelligence is a very dicey game much of the time, but I would expect also that when those POWs, the 5 POWs that were taken in that incident, are returned safely, that they will be able to give the full story as to what happened there that day.
Chris, just as you were talking, I was just informed that we actually have the satellite version of Iraqi TV that has suddenly reappeared. We're actually just going to show some of what they are showing right now at this hour. So that obviously being significant, because we've just been talking about the destruction earlier of Iraqi TV capabilities. Apparently it's back on. This is the satellite version, and they're showing. I don't know if it's a music video or not, but it's quite interesting. Chris Planta live at the Pentagon. Thanks very much. Come back to you later. Carol?
A music video with guns. Dancing with guns. All right, we're going to go to Darren Kagan because she's been on the weather watch this morning because the weather is affecting how the coalition forces are reacting today.
Good morning to both of you. Actually, we're already into afternoon. It's 20 after 12. As you can see, I think it still looks like a sandstorm behind me, although nothing like it looked earlier today where it looked like just a big yellow wall of sand. We're going to get to more on that in just a second. First, I want to go on to something much more serious, and this is the conflicting reports regarding Basra this morning, and the British military saying that residents are staging an uprising against Saddam Hussein's regime. Iraq's foreign minister denies that. We want to go ahead and get the latest from our Tom Montier. He is at Central Command headquarters in Doha, Qatar. Tom, hello.
Darren, I should tell you that we're undergoing the same sandstorm right now, so the television transmission may be interrupted while I speak, but here inside, the sand is not blowing. Outside, you can't see hardly to the end of your arm. Yes, there are conflicting reports about what's going on in Basra. A military spokesman here told me earlier that it is quiet now, but overnight, that he said people were out in the streets uprising against the regime, saying that they were attacked by mortar fire from Ba'ath Party headquarters. A British military returned the fire, raining down mortars on that headquarters, and then calling in an airstrike that eventually silenced the mortars that were being lodged against the civilian population. Now, when you talk to the British about what's next for Basra, whether they're going to go in because they've already declared it a military objective and take it, they say they're not quite ready to do that, that when they are ready to do it, it will be done, and then we'll be told about it. But they are quite concerned about the humanitarian situation inside Basra.
All right, Tom, and I would like to know more about that humanitarian condition inside of Basra. Of course, we're talking about the second largest city in all of Iraq, about 1.7 million people. It could be that this is like the third or fourth day that these people have not had clean water or electricity. They're not willing to say, the British at this point, when they're going to take that next military step, but what about looking beyond that? When do they think they will be able to allow some of these organizations to get in and help with humanitarian aid?
Well, the British military says they do have humanitarian supplies with their troops in the field, and they will be provided upon entering the city. But as far as when that's going to take place, they're not willing to say. They do say that the water situation is at a critical stage, and there is no electricity in Basra. So they are concerned for the lack of pure drinking water and the fact that there's no electricity. But they do say they have drinking water with them, they have humanitarian meals with them, and once they enter the city, they will be provided to the people of Basra. Just when that's going to be, nobody is saying right now. In about 2.5 hours, we expect a briefing here at Central Command with possibly an update on the Basra situation. Back to you.
All right. Well, I'm sure when that begins at CENTCOM, you're going to see it live right here on CNN, just both domestically and on CNN International. Tom Tier, thank you very much. We're going to continue to talk about humanitarian aid. Later this hour, we're going to have a report for you on efforts to get that aid to the Iraqis, not just in Basra, but all across the country. I'm going to talk with Kuwait's Minister of Public Health, who's coordinating some relief efforts. Fascinating interview, and also very interesting to see the attitude of the Kuwaitis here about really wanting to help their neighbors to the north. New York Times is reporting that some U.S. prisoners of war were apparently executed by their Iraqi captors. We just heard a little bit about this story from our Chris Klein at the Pentagon. The paper says that accusation comes from American officials who cautioned the information at this point comes from a single source. We're talking about the 7 soldiers who were killed on Sunday when their unit was ambushed after making a wrong turn in the town of Nasiriyah. A videotape showed some soldiers with apparent bullet wounds to the head. It is unclear how many soldiers were allegedly executed rather than killed in the fighting. 5 other Americans were taken prisoner, and at least 3 are still missing. Associated Press reports that a second U.S. soldier has died from wounds suffered in a grenade attack blamed on a fellow soldier. 13 others were wounded in that attack. The suspect is an Army Sergeant, Asin Akbar. He is now at a military jail in Germany awaiting formal charges. He's accused of tossing grenades into a command tent of the 101st Airborne Division. That happened on Sunday in Kuwait. Anderson, back to you.
All right, Darren, thanks very much. Live from Kuwait City. We'll come back to Darren shortly for an update of the headlines. We're going to check in with Tom Tier right now, who is with CENTCOM, at the CENTCOM headquarters in Doha, Qatar. Tom, what do you got?
Anderson, just in the last couple of seconds, received some information from military sources here in Doha that they do believe that Saddam Hussein and his military have rigged the bridges in and around Baghdad with explosives. They say that these bridges are wired to explode and that they are set for destruction by the regime in Baghdad. They say these are the same tactics used as global terrorists do. Again, these are military sources telling us that there is intelligence information that the bridges leading into Baghdad have been wired with explosives, heavily loaded with explosives to be triggered at a point uncertain. But they do have information that these bridges are set for destruction on the entrances to Baghdad. Back to you.
Well, Tom, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Walter Rogers reporting, I think it was about 24 hours ago, when the 7th Cavalry crossed over the bridge over the Euphrates. He indicated that they're the same deal, basically, that those bridges, that bridge that he crossed over, that the 7th Cavalry crossed over, was heavily wired with explosives.
Yeah, this was the bridge across the Euphrates when they made their way across that in the middle of a sandstorm and were able to take out positions at both sides of the bridge as they crossed. But what we're talking about here apparently is all of the bridges surrounding Baghdad and in Baghdad. Apparently intelligence information being generated now that all of these bridges as well are rigged. This report from Walt Rogers as they crossed over the bridge yesterday was indeed the area where the 7th Cavalry was crossing the Euphrates to push their way north. But I'm sure that the area they're facing now as they're just outside Baghdad is a lot more bridges and a lot more crossing points that apparently have all now been rigged for explosion. But that's about all the information we have on it.
All right, just one more thing the coalition forces are going to have to deal with as they approach Baghdad. And Thomas, I'm sure you will agree, I'm sure there's a fascinating story that will be revealed once all of this is over and the books are being written about this conflict, about how that information was found on the ground, how that intelligence information came into coalition hands about these bridges. Obviously, it's something we don't know now, nor would we be able to comment on it if we did. It will be an interesting story to tell one day, I'm sure. Tom Tier, live at CENTCOM headquarters. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Let's go to a short break. We'll be right back.
New America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
America Online has so much more.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
You can pick what emails you want to see first in your mailbox.
With AOL's new parental controls, I can set up for each one of my children.
I can control when and how long they stay online.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days and hundreds of new features.
Searching is quick and easy.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
I can sign up to AOL from home or on the road.
There are more access numbers than ever.
The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
They're friendly, they're responsive.
Call 1-800-901-9795 now and get started right over the phone with 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
It's an AOL like you've never seen before.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
CNN Today find out how long before troops roll into Baghdad, plus the struggle to reach U.S. POWs. The American Red Cross makes urgent attempts, how the efforts are going, on the next American Morning with Paul Azan. CNN Today, 7 a.m. Eastern. CNN Tonight, Joint Chiefs of Staff Vice Chairman General Peter Pace, plus families of soldiers missing in action, and his colleagues are MIA in Iraq. Journalist Sir Trevor McDonald on Larry King Live. CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Introducing New America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
America Online has so much more.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
You can pick what emails you want to see first in your mailbox.
With AOL's new parental controls, I can set up for each one of my children.
I can control when and how long they stay online.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days and hundreds of new features.
Searching is quick and easy.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
I can sign up to AOL from home or on the road.
There are more access numbers than ever.
The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
They're friendly, they're responsive.
Call 1-800-901-9795 now and get started right over the phone with 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
It's an AOL like you've never seen before.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
And here's what's happening at this hour, the latest developments in the war against Iraq. After a fierce battle with Iraqi forces, British military officials say the port city of Qasr is now secure. Here's the pictures from Tuesday, British forces walking through the streets. It is Iraq's only Persian Gulf port, very significant. Coalition forces plan to bring humanitarian aid into Iraq through the port. British general just a short while ago said he believes that'll start happening on Thursday. Iraqi television moved onto the coalition target list. The Pentagon confirms a Tomahawk cruise missile struck the building this morning. Our programming was knocked off the air for a few hours. We just saw a satellite Iraqi TV back on the air. One senior U.S. official says Iraqi TV has always been a target, but until now it was seen as beneficial to leave it up and running. No word on what's going to happen now that it is back on the air, at least the satellite TV. In northern Iraq, where Iraqi forces face Kurdish fighters, coalition airstrikes have targeted some of the Iraqi command bunkers. CNN's Kevin Seitz is in the Kurdish-controlled area and reports seeing at least 6 airstrikes on the Iraqi positions this morning. We have been bringing that to you live all morning long. And we have reports of a massive uprising by the civilian population in Basra against the Iraqi regime. Now that is according to British military officials at Central Command. Iraqi officials deny the report. We'll get you more as we get it. Could be very significant, however. The Pentagon says coalition forces killed as many as 300 Iraqis Tuesday in a battle in the Euphrates Valley east of Najaf. Coalition forces reported no casualties, but some combat vehicles were lost. Iraqi forces disabled 2 U.S. M1A1 Abrams tanks on Tuesday. An officer with the Army's 7th Cavalry tells CNN no soldiers were hurt in the attacks. That's a graphic of the M1A1 Abrams.
And let's update you on the action we've been seeing this morning. We want to take you to the Kurdish part of Iraq, northern Iraq, and Brent Sadler, who is in Kalak. And Brent, you heard the airstrikes that were actually happening not far from you.
That's right, Carol. No aircraft activity in the past few hours, but earlier on today, as my colleague Kevin Seitz was reporting, a significant change in what we've been seeing since the war began on Iraq. Consistent airstrikes, air activity overhead on the northern front. Now that change in tactics, if you like, in this area has coincided with calls from Iraq's main opposition groups that the US should start acknowledging that the Iraqi opposition could play a higher profile role in trying to defeat Saddam Hussein's forces, not least by helping foment opposition popular uprisings in some of the main cities, particularly Basra. We know there's a popular uprising going on there, and perhaps in other cities, the key northern ones being Kirkuk and Mosul. In northern Iraq, a growing sense of frustration among Iraq's armed opposition groups. Their leaders meeting in the Kurdish stronghold of Salahuddin, some 250 miles north of Baghdad. Praise around this table for stunning coalition advances on the battlefield, but sharp criticism too. American-led planning, they claim, is failing to make the most of what they have to offer, and a message for President George W. Bush.
I hope that he will understand the importance of Iraqi opposition very soon and order for full cooperation and coordination with Iraqi opposition to end the war as soon as possible.
In other words, opposition groups, including these Kurds, are waiting a call to arms. Their leaders insisting it's a mistake for American and British troops to fight dying remnants of Iraq's regime alone.
There are forces in the south, there are people in the cities who are ready to move forward. The Americans make an appeal to people to stay at home. The job of dealing with Saddam's thugs who are now attacking American troops in the south is not for American forces. It is for the Iraqi people and for the forces led by the leadership of the opposition.
In the first open sign the US Central Command may be listening, a Marine Corps general has begun leading efforts to help coordinate activity, particularly along this largely inactive northern front. Quiet now, but that could change.
I think you need to bring more pressure from all directions, and that's why this front is needed, because it goes to the heart of Saddam Hussein regime.
And could lead to the final collapse of his command and control. Now what we're seeing on the ground here is that despite the opposition groups that you heard there complaining about Iraqis not being involved in the fight for the liberation of Iraq as a whole, that Kurdish forces here in this area that they control are very much coordinating and liaising with US Special Forces that are on the ground here. Those US Special Forces are being slowly increased in strength. We understand they're flying into an airstrip in covert deployments at night time and really putting more forward air controllers into the, if you like, the line of battle. Possibly why we're seeing these airstrikes on these frontline positions over the past several hours. Also the Kurds working with special forces on the means to encourage Iraqi defections among the three army corps, about 120,000 men behind the lines in Saddam Hussein's controlled area. The officers there, 60 or 70% of them, it's thought by Kurdish intelligence, to be really die-hard Saddam Hussein loyalists. So while you've got the opposition complaining on the one hand, you do have the key involvement already on the ground here with US Special Force personnel in attempts to soften up targets and to really pull the rug from under the command and control structure of Saddam Hussein on his side of the lines behind me. Back to you, Carol.
Brenna, I'm just curious, if the Kurds do join to fight, who would command them and how would they be integrated into the coalition?
Well, already the Kurds have said that they put their entire Peshmerga, that translates into those who face death, their Peshmerga forces under the command and control of the US military. We saw now a US Marine Corps general is leading coordination between the Kurds and US Central Command on several fronts, not least to try and put pressure on this northern front, also to perhaps use the Kurds, if these lines collapse under any increased bombing, that the Kurds under US command could move into Kirkuk and Mosul, which of course they know very well. They've got their own eyes and ears inside those cities through their own opposition supporters still inside those two major towns. So you've got that going on the one hand, and I think it's really interesting, Carol, to point out now that we do expect to see Turkish forces, if we are to believe what the Turkish military is saying, coming into up to about 20 kilometers, 13 miles into northern Iraq. The Kurds have been saying, and still say, they will oppose such an intervention, as they call it. But you might see in the final analysis a kind of balance, an uneasy balance perhaps, between the Turks putting themselves in here under US coordination, the Kurds under the wing, the umbrella of the United States Central Command, which already has a major general on the ground, perhaps be able to balance out those conflicting interests between the Turks and the Kurds, and also to be able to create the kind of situation here where we can stabilize this area, use the forces to put pressure on Saddam Hussein, and really, in the end game perhaps, push from these areas in the north, if sufficient US personnel come on the ground with the kind of heavy equipment needed, push through those northern towns and really put a nutcracker movement on Baghdad. That's perhaps what we might see. Back to you, Carol.
All right, Fred Sadler reporting live from Kalak in northern Iraq.
All right, we're going to check in with Bob Franken, who is at an airbase near the Iraq border. Bob, what's the latest?
You know, I figured we'd get it right later. The latest is this. At this airbase near the Iraq border, about a third of the flights had to be canceled in the 24-hour reporting period. That was the last one. Instead of 300 or so that they were going to have, it was around the 200 mark. We know why. The weather has just been awful. The sandstorms, winds, rains. It has really had a big effect, particularly from here, because this is the airbase that is to a large degree supporting the ground troops. And the ground troops, of course, have been affected both by the weather and the fact that they oftentimes were not able to get the original planned air support. Now, a lot of things have been affected. We were part of a group yesterday that was heading to a newly captured Iraq airbase in the country, but there were very serious hostilities, so the ground movement had to be stopped. Now, the reason for the ground movement, because the weather had made flying up there prohibitive. In fact, for a variety of reasons, they weren't able to fly in, so we had to come back. Enemy fire made it impossible for us to go forward. So the weather is affecting everything. It's expected, Anderson, to continue for the next day or so, and it is one of the things, even with all the high tech that the United States military has, the weather is something that you can only do so much about. Anderson?
Bob, it's my understanding that on Tuesday, coalition aircraft flew about 1,500 sorties. Do you have, and I also was sort of led to believe that about half of those were targeting the elite, or so-called elite Republican Guard units. Is that still the case? Are we going to see more and more of that sort of close air support being called in?
Well, the close air support is what they do here, and as the ground forces engage, and right prior to when they engage the Republican Guard units, that's what you'll get here. This particular airbase is noted mostly for its collection of A-10s. By now you know that those are the warthogs. They call them the anti-TAC weapons. They have really a devastating effect on the ground, so they will get a lot of activity here as the Republican Guard is being targeted, along with any other troops that are needed that the United States is taking on.
And I should just note those A-10 Warthogs that Bob just mentioned. Walter Rogers yesterday had told us that in that the various incidences that he and the 7th Cavalry had been engaged in, they had called in close air support from A-10 Warthogs. Don't know if they came from Bob's base or not, but just one more note on the close air support. Bob Franken, thanks very much. Carol?
All right, I believe we're taking a break now. Is that correct? We're going to a break. We'll be back with much more for you. Stay with us.
Tonight, General Peter Pace, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, plus families of soldiers missing in action. Only on Larry King Live, CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Everything you do your best to do it right. Work or play, nothing short of perfection satisfies you. But some things are out of your control, like hair loss. It's just a fact of life. Fortunately, today you can really do something about it. That's where Bosley Medical comes in. the world's most experienced hair restoration practice.
At Bosley, they take a little bit from the back and just move it. So it's my same hair, just in a different location.
So if you want to have your own naturally growing hair back, call this toll-free number for more information. We'll send you this free video and comprehensive guidebook that give you the real facts about hair loss and the choices you have for dealing with it.
You can pull on it all you want. It's yours, and it's going to be there for the rest of your life.
Financing is available, so call now and discover what Bosley Medical can do for you.
And being able to do this is amazing to me. It's something that I never thought I'd have again.
When it comes to life, no one can criticize you for doing your best. When it comes to your hair restoration, do it at Bosley.
CNN, the most trusted name in news.
4:45 Eastern Time. Welcome back to our coverage on the war on Iraq. We went ahead live to Washington right now to check in with our White House correspondent, Dana Bash. The President has a busy schedule today, Dana.
He sure does, Carol. Today, for the second day in a row, we're going to see the President meeting with his troops, the Commander-in-Chief with his troops. The President is really using the bully pulpit to show and to say, to really make the case that despite the fact that we are seeing some casualties on the battlefield, prisoners of war, sandstorms, he is intentionally making the case out there that there is progress being made in the war. And yesterday at the Pentagon, he made a statement that we're likely to hear at least similar themes today, saying that the U.S. coalition is going strong and has so far been very successful on the war front.
We're fighting an enemy that knows no rules of law, that will wear civilian uniforms, that is willing to kill in order to continue the reign of fear of Saddam Hussein, but we're fighting him with bravery and courage. We cannot know the duration of this war, yet we know its outcome. We will prevail.
Now, later today, we will see more images of the President with the troops. He is going to go down to Tampa, Florida. This will be his first domestic travel outside of the Washington area in more than a month. Now, Tampa, Florida is the home of Central Command, and that is where General Tommy Franks generally hangs his hat. He, of course, is directing the war for the United States, but he is now doing that in the region in Doha, Qatar. But the President is going to go down and meet with some of the brass at Central Command in Tampa, Florida. He's going to have lunch with the troops and, of course, make a speech once again. Now, tonight, he is going to have another very important meeting. He is going to meet with his top ally in this effort, the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair. The two men will meet at Camp David beginning tonight to discuss war strategy, of course, but they are also, we are told by both U.S. and British sources, going to talk about reconstruction plans, what to do, how to deal with a post-war Iraq. That is going to be on the top of the agenda, certainly for Prime Minister Tony Blair and also for President Bush. Prime Minister Tony Blair made very clear yesterday that he wants a post-war Iraq to be sort of governed by and involved with the United Nations. That is something that we are told he is going to press the President to deal with, to try to go through the UN. So a very busy day ahead for the President, a very busy couple of days ahead for the President, as we see a lot more of him these days than we have over the past week, certainly since the war started. Carol?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. You probably watched the Pentagon briefing yesterday. It was rather contentious when reporters were asking the question of this shock and awe campaign and saying it didn't shock and awe as much as expected, and perhaps the President didn't prepare the American people properly for this war on Iraq.
Well, you know, when you ask administration officials about that, and as you said, you heard it at the Pentagon briefing and you even heard it at the White House briefing yesterday, they say very much that they believe that the President and all of his top aides did prepare America for it, and they say that they believe that they made very clear that what war is. And you heard Secretary Rumsfeld, as you said yesterday, making it clear that anybody who thought that this would be a cakewalk doesn't understand what war means. But again, sort of some Democrats particularly have been pointing to remarks that Vice President Dick Cheney made, I think it was last Sunday, saying that he believed that this could be a short event and perhaps the Republican Guard would fall pretty quickly. So there sort of have been mixed comments, perhaps, but the administration is making very clear that they believe that they have always made the case that war is a long process, and certainly since at least last Saturday, I think that was day 3 of the war, the president used his radio address to make clear that he wanted Americans to realize that this could be a very long process and a dangerous one.
Certainly so. Dana Bash reporting live from Washington this morning.
And Dana reporting that British Prime Minister Tony Blair is going to be coming to meet with the president. Yesterday, Blair was telling reporters he was thinking that some Iraqis were not sort of publicly coming forward and speaking up and taking to the streets against these irregular forces because in the past, in 1991, in Basra, for instance, when some of the Shia did uprise, they weren't supported by outside forces, and he gave a message to those Iraqis. Today, he said, yesterday, he said, my message to them today is that this time we will not let you down. Saddam and his regime will be removed. Iraq will have a better future ahead. That was British Prime Minister Tony Blair.
And perhaps they're listening because what's going on in Basra right now, at least we have reports of Iraqi people revolting against Saddam Hussein's forces there.
That's right. British military officials telling reporters that in Basra there is some sort of an uprising. It's a little bit confusing at this point, not clear how big it is, exactly who is involved, but it seems that there is some sort of uprising by some of the Shia population there against these irregular forces, which, as we've been reporting over the last 24 hours or so, have retreated back into the city and are trying to blend with the civilian population, and some say use them as human shields, essentially, and draw coalition forces into some sort of street fighting. That doesn't seem to be happening. There seems to be some sort of an uprising, so perhaps some good news for coalition forces coming out of Basra, and we will be following that in the next 24 hours or so. Let's get more right now on the day's major developments in the war in Iraq. CNN's Miles O'Brien has our recap.
Recapping developments in the past few hours. 1:55 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 U.S. troops injured in Iraq arrived for treatment at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. 4:50 p.m. U.S. authorities said Marines seized a hospital in Nasiriyah and captured nearly 170 Iraqi soldiers who had been staging military operations from the facility. They also confiscated 3,000 chemical protection suits. 5:33 p.m. Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr reports what may be the biggest ground-to-ground battle so far in the war, underway south of Baghdad. Early reports indicate there may be 150 to 200 Iraqi casualties happening near the city of Karbala. No reports yet of coalition forces killed or wounded. 6:10 p.m. Eastern. More details are emerging about an uprising in the southern city of Basra. British pool reporter Richard Gaisford, embedded with the United Kingdom troops, reports Shia residents are clashing with Iraqi soldiers. A missile strike was called in that destroyed Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath Party headquarters. 6:14. Gary Tuchman says tropical storm force winds and heavy rains have limited the number of U.S. sorties flown from an airbase where he's embedded near the Iraqi border. 8:55 p.m. Eastern, 4:55 a.m. in Iraq. Several explosions are heard in Baghdad, and smoke is seen rising from Iraqi TV buildings and the Ministry of Information. Pentagon sources confirm Iraqi TV was the target of a coalition strike. Iraqi TV's satellite signal becomes intermittent, and the station's domestic land signal is off the air.
And we should point out an update on that. Iraqi television is now back on the air, at least Iraqi satellite television. We showed you some of the broadcast that they were seeing at this moment just a little while ago. And broadcasting resumed just a few hours ago, we are told. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back. More on the war in Iraq.
Introducing New America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
America Online has so much more.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
You can pick what emails you want to see first in your mailbox.
With AOL's new parental controls, I can set up for each one of my children.
I can control when and how long they stay online.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days and hundreds of new features.
Searching is quick and easy.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
I can sign up to AOL from home or on the road.
There are more access numbers than ever.
The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
They're friendly, they're responsive.
Call 1-800-901-9795 now and get started right over the phone with 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
It's an AOL like you've never seen before.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
You decided. Once again, CNN is #1. For trust and experience, Americans choose CNN as the most credible news source. CNN is the most trusted name in news.
Had some positive news for coalition forces this morning. The port city of Qasr now completely under control of coalition forces, and also the waters around Qasr cleared of mines so that those humanitarian ships can come in and start delivering humanitarian aid into the people, humanitarian aid into Iraq for the Iraqi people.
Yeah, the British official telling a reporter just a short time ago that they hope that by Thursday is when the first shipment of aid will actually come in. Said there are still some, perhaps one or two people here and there, small pockets of resistance, but by and large the city is secure. That's the word that came out just a couple hours ago from British officials.
And of course a lot of humanitarian aid waiting to be delivered in Kuwait. That's of course where Darren Kagan is now. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning, or actually good afternoon. By this point, it's almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon here in Kuwait City on Wednesday. You mentioned humanitarian aid. There is a lot of it in this country, stockpiling, waiting to get across the border, as you mentioned, waiting for it to be safe. This has been frustrating for the folks trying to get that to them. Let's take a look at that, and then we'll have an interview. With fighting intensifying around Basra, humanitarian officials worried about a crisis worsening in Iraq's second largest city. 1.7 million people without electricity and clean water. The fighting makes it impossible for aid to get in, and that makes the United Nations Secretary General angry.
And I think a city that size cannot afford to go without electricity or water for long. Apart from the water aspect, you can imagine what it does to sanitation.
230 kilometers, or about 140 miles south of Basra, the volunteers of the Kuwait Red Crescent hope the opportunity to move help across the border will come soon. The supplies are all donated, but they won't go anywhere until the U.S. military and the Kuwaiti government determine it's safe to cross into Iraq, a frustration shared by aid organizations across the region.
We also have to go through the security issue and make sure that even if we have the things on the trucks ready to go, they will only go when we know that the convoy is safe.
While they wait for that green light, the Kuwaiti Red Crescent volunteers load not only supplies, but good wishes to the people who are supposed to be their enemies to the north.
This sign shows that it's from Kuwait. We dedicate this food from the Kuwaiti people to our brothers in Iraq. The Iraqi people are suffering, and they are human beings. So we are helping our brothers and sisters there. Nothing more, nothing less.
Compassion from Kuwaitis who remember what it means to be desperate. And for more on this, we have with us right now the Public Health Minister of Kuwait, Dr. Mohammed Dar Allah. Dr. Dar Allah, thank you for being with us. Pleasure to have you. What is the latest you're hearing on when, in fact, this humanitarian aid will be able to go from Kuwait into Iraq?
Well, as I mentioned, we have already sent them yesterday. This convoy consists of 8 trucks and 4 ambulances carrying around 12 tons of medical aid. It is now stored in what we call the administrative area on the Kuwaiti border.
It's right on the border. When will it be able to cross the border, sir?
By tomorrow or day after tomorrow, we'll get the clearance from the coalition to give us the green light to continue our mission inside the Iraqi, across the Iraqi border.
I think people around the world, I think certainly back in the United States, are fascinated with the idea that even after what happened 12 years ago, how Iraq came and invaded your country and all the death and devastation and the pain that it caused, the Kuwaiti people still have it in their hearts to help the Iraqi people.
Well, I think this is a very natural reaction, and we do have the very good feelings toward the Iraqi people. We know that they are suffering a lot, like we have suffered in the past for the dark 7 months we were invaded by the Iraqi regime. The Iraqi people, they are suffering till now for decades by this by this dictator. And I think we should help them by all means. That's why you notice that we have now an emergency state in the medical stores in Kuwait City, so as to manage to push as much as we could for medical aids for the liberated part in Iraq, of course with the help of the coalition and the American medical staff there.
So as soon as you get the green light, you're ready to go.
Oh yes.
We wish you well.
Unfortunately, I mean, we are sending the Iraqi people the food, medical aids, clean water, and the regime are sending us rockets, missiles to the Kuwaiti city.
A sad irony indeed, but all still safe here in Kuwait City. Dr. Al-Allah, thank you so much. We wish you good luck when you do get the green light to go across the border. That's going to do it from here in Kuwait City. I'm going to step out. Bill Hemmer will step in for the next hour, and I think next 6 or 7 hours, working some long shifts here in Kuwait City, but happy to do it. Carol, back to you in Atlanta.
All right, thanks so much. Darren Kagan, live from Kuwait. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll begin our next hour. You stick around.
The UN Constitution itself, apart from the violation to its United Nations resolutions as well. But we are not, of course, depending on them. We are trying our best to have good contacts with the other non-governmental organizations and the individual volunteers or a group of volunteers from our Arab brothers, Islamic brothers, and from other friends in the world.
Minister, you said you had contact with a lot of the medical institutions all over the country. What can you tell us about the situation in Basra? We heard that there's quite a serious problem with water and other health conditions. What are your staff able to tell you about that?
I think I've answered that, but still, it's important to repeat it again. You know, the victims, the civilian victims in Basra, even inside Basra, is very prominent and well known by all of you. What happened yesterday was really a very dramatic situation because they targeted a very important poor district, bombarded it with this kind of cluster bombs, and the victims were 51, and "13 martyrs, just for the last 12 hours. And I have told you about the pollution and this environmental situation, especially the water supply system, which is the most important thing, you know, for such kind of infectious diseases like cholera and others.
Do you have the total number of vessels? Do you have a global figure of the civilian victims since the beginning?
Yes.
In Iraq, globally, and in Baghdad?
Yes, we are just trying to collect all these figures to be more accurate, but until now we have got around of more than 4,000 civilian victims.
How many deaths total?
In all Iraq.
And how many dead? How many deaths total?
Pardon?
How many dead? Yes. How many martyrs?
How many martyrs? It's more than 350. 350, more than 350. But the accurate figure would be available within the next few hours. But most of these martyrs and the victims are children, women, and elderly people who cannot afford to protect themselves as the younger people are doing that.
Excellency, yesterday the Red Crescent issued a statement saying that they were prevented to reach victims in the southern area. Can you confirm that?
That's right. In Qasr, there were 3 victims having severe internal bleeding from their internal bleeding in the abdomen. So they were in need of immediate surgery. But those aggressors prevented them to be transported by the ambulances. I hear by telephone from the director of the hospital of Qasr that 3 journalists, 2 from France and 1 from Belgium, tried their best as a human being to transport them to the nearby hospital in Basra. They prevented them by gunshots. So the 3 of them died immediately after that. That's why the director of the Bureau of Red Crescent in Basra asked the help and the assistance of the Central Bureau in Baghdad. This is the reality. This event was real.
Russian television, Russian. سيد الوزير، هل بعد توقف مذكرة التفاهم هل حدث نقص في الغذاء والدواء؟ هل حد الدواء تحديدا؟ ماذا ستفعلون لتعويضه؟ بالعربي.
As Mr. Kofi Annan بالعربي. طبعا تصرف كوفي عنان اليمين العام.
The behavior of Kofi Annan
سحب موظفيه وملاحظيه
by withdrawing his employees who were supervising with the Iraqis led to the stop of all these activities, including the Ministry of Health. By this wrong behavior, which violates the simplest of UN Charter, led to the cancellation of this program. Even the medical supplies that are in at the borders did not reach Iraq because there is no way to transport it into Iraq. Some of these companies are Arab Middle Eastern countries and some are European. This need to submit these contracts to Iraq without consideration about payment for now. This is not going to be, we're not asking for help, but we're asking for accounts receivable and out of their national and humanitarian concern. We are ready to receive these supplies, but United Nations employees are not here, and so we could not receive them. They were not delivered. Therefore, what Mr. Kofi Annan did by withdrawing the employees is not humanitarian and it's not right. Many of the, and this is in violation of all the agreements and all the decisions that were made by United Nations regarding oil for food and medicine. We know that the Iraqi nation, since 1991, we were preparing for this, and we have stored some medical supplies, and we have a good levels of them. We have a lot of medical expertise, and they are trained to use medicine in creative ways, and they can use alternative and use it efficiently. In the media, how everybody knows from broadcasts that how doctors can are providing services under very difficult circumstances with efficiency and accuracy. Many of the medical staff do not even want to leave the hospital sometimes because they want to provide more services. Even though we have all these obstacles that were put by United States and Britain to prevent us being ready and have equipment and want to stop us to provide these supplies. But thank God, and under the supervisions of the President, we found alternatives for these supplies, and we have a lot of storage that would be enough for us. Not a single hospital asked us to send more supplies because they have enough in their facilities. They are using alternative, even sometimes some primitive medicine. As I mentioned, about 6 months ago, we did not receive any vaccinations but we managed to get enough.
You were listening to and have been listening to a press conference given in Baghdad. It is 12:10 right now p.m. in Baghdad on Thursday. The press conference by Midhat Mubarak, Iraq's health minister, making quite a lot of statements, saying that some more than 350 Iraqis have been killed since the war began, saying most of those were children, women, old people, basically insisting that the coalition forces are targeting civilians, says that some 36 Iraqis were killed in the last 24 hours in Baghdad alone. He also claimed that coalition forces are targeting water supplies, and he also talked about hospitals being targeted in Qasr, Nasiriyah, in stark contrast, of course, to what coalition forces have been saying over the last several days and what some of the pictures we have been seeing. In Qasr, we recently saw the picture of the school that was apparently filled with weapons, some military uniforms. There was the hospital in Nasiriyah where there were no patients, but there were a large number of chemical suits, as well as atropine, the antidote for nerve gas, as well as some weaponry, some hand grenades. So quite a stark contrast, this press conference in Baghdad, to press conferences we have seen just earlier this morning in Doha, Qatar, from coalition forces. The health minister also saying that Iraqi hospitals don't need supplies, that in many cases they are using alternative medicine and are doing just fine. For some commentary, for some insight, we're going to turn to Reem Brahimi, who is standing by in Amman, Jordan. She is a veteran of many such press conferences, and we go to her for her perspective. Reem?
Anderson, indeed, an interesting press conference by the health minister. Interesting also that he's reinforcing some points that were already made a couple of days ago by Iraq's trade minister. All the points he made about the oil for food deal, the fact that the resolution was not being respected and was being violated since the United Nations humanitarian staff were pulled out, accusing almost Kofi Annan, the UN Secretary General, almost personally of being responsible for this, saying that it was an unhumanitarian act that goes against the United Nations Charter. Since they've pulled out their staff, that has stopped all the food and medicine that was supposed to come into Iraq under the Oil for Food program to be available to Iraqi citizens. That said, the element of pride, of course, that we see very often among Iraqi officials, the line that they are self-sufficient, they do not need much more, though also specifying that it's not humanitarian aid they need, of course specifying that under the Oil for Food deal, what food and medicine was available was paid for by Iraq with Iraq's oil, basically, stressing that it's not a charity that they're asking for, but just for their right to be able to have this food and medicine sent to them. Now, the minister also mentioned, as you said, Anderson, those casualties, saying 350 casualties since the beginning of the conflict, accusing the US and Britain of deliberately targeting hospitals and civilian areas in various areas in the south of Iraq, as well as in Baghdad itself, saying, however, that hospitals in Baghdad were quite self-sufficient, that they have been preparing, he said, since 1991 for such an eventuality, that their doctors are very well trained and that they're keen to stay on and look after the Iraqi casualties rather than go home, that they have stocked up on medicine as well. saying that the medicine they have, well, might not always be adequate or sufficient, but they've developed very creative ways of handling any situation that comes at them. It's sort of quite a regular defiant speech in a way, Anderson.
Yeah, very defiant. I'm interested just briefly to know how this plays, and it's a question I keep coming back to, but I think for many Americans, probably many British people as well, who watch these press conferences and hear this health minister saying that the coalition is targeting civilians, they are targeting the water supply. It doesn't certainly play well here. It seems beyond belief to many who probably observe it here in the United States. Yet when it plays on Al Jazeera, when it plays on Abu Dhabi TV and the others, is it met with the same sense of credulity, or are the Qatar press conferences that the coalition forces give, are those met with complete skepticism?
Well, definitely channels, broadcasters like Al Jazeera, like Abu Dhabi or Al Arabiya, the latest addition to the Arabic broadcasters, well, they're airing both sides as much as I think they can. They're getting a lot of access to Iraqi officials, and of course maybe there's not the image problem in the Arab world with regard to Iraqi officials that they would have in the Western world or in countries that are involved in this war, for instance. Now, that said, of course, people do watch this with a lot of, they're very attentive. They do tend to believe what they see on Al Jazeera or Abu Dhabi, and they will tend to probably take the Minister of Health of Iraq, for instance, for his word more than they would a U.S. commander in many cases. This is news that is brought to them in Arabic. This is news, there's an emotional link as well. You have to remember, Anderson, it's the emotion of saying, well, we don't particularly like the regime. I don't think anybody in the Arab world is supporting President Saddam Hussein per se, but they are extremely supporting of the Iraqi people. A lot of them have seen Iraqi exiles spread out throughout the region, and they are extremely sensitive to words like that, to when a minister says, well, casualties have been hit and they're deliberately targeting casualties. It also comes back to this idea in the Arab world that there is a bit of a deliberate attempt on the part of the US and Britain to maybe dominate the Arab region.
All
Back
right.
to you, Anderson.
Reem, as always, I appreciate it. I'm sorry to keep asking throwing the same question to you, but it is very interesting to a lot of people here, the perspective. Carol?
You were talking about Abu Dhabi TV. We have pictures just coming in from there, and these may be positive pictures for the coalition forces. I'm sure they are. These are tape pictures from Abu Dhabi TV, and you're going to see, well, you were going to see Iraqi citizens in Basra coming out to greet British troops. We're re-racking the tape right now. And if that's true, that means British troops are in the city of Basra, which we didn't know before. At least we think so.
We don't know that.
We don't know that, but we know that Iraqi citizens are coming somewhere around Basra to greet
there has been
British
so much activity, as you know, as we were talking about earlier, in the whole Basra region, and the strategy so far of coalition forces, and as far as we know, the sort of ringing the city, trying to stay outside as much as possible outside that city. So it'll be interesting when we get these pictures. Oh, here they are. Let's take a look. There's coalition forces, British forces, largely ringing the city. It's hard to tell a little bit of what this.
These are live pictures now, Anderson. We're taking live off of Abu Dhabi TV, so we'll just have to see what unfolds here. You can see children running across the landscape there, and women.
And it's playing live in Abu Dhabi. The pictures are tape, I'm just being told right now, so it's not actually happening live. It happened some time ago, but playing live right now on Abu Dhabi TV. And there has been this question that was addressed in the press conference that CENTCOM gave shortly ago. There we see some sort of medical vehicle. Oh, and here's the picture you were talking about, Carol, of the people. There has been so much activity. Earlier, I don't know if you all were still watching us at this point, but there was a briefing by CENTCOM by British Commander Brian Burridge, a British Air Marshal, who said that what is going on right now in Basra, it is the classic ambiguous battle space. It is difficult and it is a confused situation, basically unclear. Not sure these pictures clarify anything for us. What we do know has been going on in Basra, and it is, or at least what we think we know, what we have heard reports of, is at least in one area there was small arms fire, believed to be some elements within the population. Earlier, British officials were calling it an uprising. They seem to be sort of backing off that to some degree, but some sort of small arms fire and the militia, the Ba'ath Party militia, responded to that small arms fire with some sort of mortar fire directly into the streets. British coalition forces targeted those mortars with their own mortars. Then sometime over the last 12, 18 hours or so, at two separate incidences, there were columns of armored vehicles coming out of Basra. First, a column of some, I believe, 40 vehicles or so. Later, there was a column of some 70 or so vehicles coming out of Basra, heading toward the Foix Peninsula, heading toward Mqasar, regions secured by coalition forces already. And it wasn't quite clear, according to the British official who talked earlier, exactly what was going on, whether those were elements of the Iraqi army who had been forced literally at gunpoint, according to...
Yeah, there was a chilling account that he had of Saddam's forces putting the guns to the heads of family members to force these people into the tanks to drive them in a line of fire.
Right. And again, he said that the forces, that armored column that came out, it was disorganized, but it looked as if someone was trying to organize it. This, according to British Air Marshal Brian Burridge. Both those columns met with resistance from coalition forces, artillery, and air support. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Hey, I'll get this. Besides, I get airline miles. With your business card? Huh.
What is your credit card doing for your small business?
You earn miles on everything you buy? Yeah, from supplies to travel expenses.
The Citi Platinum Select Advantage Business Card. Call now and you could get 1 mile for every $1 you spend. Miles that may never expire. Plus 10,000 bonus miles.
I use my miles for car rentals, hotels, on over 25 top airlines, even a well-earned vacation.
Plus, get benefits like account summaries, business discounts, online fraud protection, and more. Call now to request your card.
I'd like the Citi Advantage Business Card and 10,000 bonus miles.
And soon, your miles could take you almost anywhere.
Oh, Paris is great. And flying free? Makes it even better. Smart business decision.
The Citi Advantage Business Card.
Call now to request your card and 10,000 bonus miles.
CNN puts you alongside the troops.
I'll tell you about the two main things that the strike fighters are dealing with.
There goes a plane taking off now. More reporters in the region to keep you informed. No one gets you closer than CNN, the most trusted name in news.
And hello, everybody. Again, it's 4:21 Eastern Time. I'm Carol Costello. It would be 12:21 p.m. in Baghdad. You're seeing a live shot out of there where things seem quiet right now. Of course, we don't know that because this is just a stationary shot, of course.
That's right. We just had a brief press conference from Iraq's health minister, who said that, according to him, the last 24 hours or so, I believe he said some 24 or so civilians or Iraqis were killed in Baghdad. That is unconfirmed at this point. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anderson Cooper. Thanks for joining our continuing coverage of the war in Iraq. A lot has gone on in the last hour. We've received some battlefield video from near Najaf in central Iraq. There you see it on the map. Now we're going to take a look at the video. Quite dramatic. A Paladin howitzer there. You're going to see some other pictures closer up soon. A Paladin howitzer, by the way, is a mobile artillery piece that's in the U.S. arsenal. Apparently it had a misfire while shooting at Iraqi positions. Apparently there has been some heavy activity in this region. The vehicle was destroyed by flames, an explosion of ordnance inside. That's not the vehicle. We're going to pan over. I believe the camera's going to pan over soon. You're going to see a vehicle on fire. You're then going to see a secondary explosion within the vehicle, which the soldiers often call cooking off. Again, you're going to see a better shot than this. I hate to keep delaying it, but coming up, you're going to see this vehicle have what they call a cook-off, which is where some of the munitions inside the vehicle, here it is, you're about to see this coming up. Let's just pause and watch it. There you saw it, one munition coming out of the vehicle, a secondary explosion. Now, 2 soldiers were injured in this misfire, but we're told those injuries are not life-threatening. I believe one was a burn to the hand. Not sure what the other one is. We're going to keep you informed as more information becomes available. These pictures we just got in about 30 minutes or so ago, I guess was the first time we showed them.
Definitely so.
And we want to update you right now where coalition forces are in Iraq at this moment. Most coalition forces on the ground are now in central and southern Iraq, but the U.S. military is also building up its northern front. 1,000 paratroopers are now on the ground in the north, securing a key airfield and Kurdish-controlled zone. There you see it up there. And top U.S. military officials say earlier reports that a large group, that red arrow there, large group of Republican Guard troops who were allegedly heading south from Baghdad. Well, that appears to be based on inaccurate intelligence and is simply not happening, according to Pentagon officials. Carol?
Yeah, the reason I was trying to jump in there, we have news from Central Command headquarters in Doha, Qatar. Tom Mintier is standing by with that news. What is it, Tom?
Carol, I just came out of a briefing with a senior CENTCOM official who says the weather situation over Iraq is improving and they expect to increase and step up their operations in the coming hours and days. They say for the next 48 to 72 hours, the weather forecast is good for clear skies, so the air operations will continue unabated. Also, the Department of Defense is preparing a release. They had it in the room, they held it up and showed it to me, but they're not ready to release it yet. They say it has to go up the chain. Now, this is a release involving the incident yesterday where this weapon apparently went off inside this market in Baghdad. They're saying that their analysts have been looking at the pictures and analyzing them and trying to determine whose weapon this might have been. Apparently some indication from these analysts that it may not have been a coalition weapon, but we'll have to wait and see what this announcement is from the Department of Defense later on. There will be a briefing here later today. This morning, the Air Marshal, the commander of British forces in Iraq, met with reporters and talked about, as we were discussing earlier, the situation in Basra, saying that on 2 occasions in the last couple of days, there have been units coming out of Basra in tanks and APCs, but claiming that these people are being forced to climb into these vehicles and move out of the city and face a much larger, stronger force, oftentimes at gunpoint.
These militias, probably the Ba'ath Party militia, go through a neighborhood, round up the existing soldiery, put them in their tanks and say, go that way. And you can tell from the way they're dispossessed operationally that this isn't a fighting formation that really knows its business. That's the way it is. It is disorganized, but there is someone in there trying to organize it. It's totally different from that conventional line of operation that I referred to, where you are actually dealing with forces who can maneuver, forces who have intelligence, forces who have a picture on which to go. So it's very different from that.
Also some very strong words from the British Air Marshal against the TV satellite network Al Jazeera, saying that it was disgraceful to show the video of dead UK soldiers laying on the ground, saying that it was a very distasteful behavior and that they should not be doing this. A reporter from Al Jazeera stood up, had the first question in the press conference, saying that they were reporting on both sides of the war, showing the situation in Iraq and showing the situation on the coalition side as well, and asked if that was a question. He said no. He said, well, then you've made your statement, and went on to the next question. So we are expecting a briefing later today by CENTCOM officials, probably getting an update on that DOD statement that we were talking about earlier, and the situation moving forward in the next 48 to 72 hours, where they say the weather is clearing, the sandstorms are finished, and operations may be stepped up in intensity. Back to you.
All right, Tom Mintier reporting live from Qatar this morning. Let's go to Kuwait right now, where there was some grim excitement there, I guess we could term it. Darren Kagan, tell us about it.
Well, Carol and Anderson, it looks like my guess was a good one. The Kuwaiti Air Force in the last few minutes coming out and confirming that at 11:38 Eastern, actually local time here, Kuwait time, almost an hour ago, 2 Patriot missiles were fired by the Kuwaiti military, and it did intercept a missile that was being sent from Iraq. Give our viewers some perspectives, some reporting I've been able to do since I've been here in Kuwait. I've actually been able to visit one of the Kuwait Air Force's Patriot Battery military sites, and we're out there just a few days ago, and the Kuwait Air Force, kind of incredible. They give you access that you don't get from the U.S. military. I was able to get really just right up close to one of those missile launchers, and hopefully, I don't have a monitor that shows you what you're seeing in the U.S., but you are seeing those pictures right now of what those missile launchers look like up close. They're just in the middle of the desert, in the middle of a big Bedouin community. I can't tell you exactly where, because that's one of the conditions of taking us out there. But we are able to show you what it looks like from the ground, where those missiles are shot off. Now, I've also had the chance to go out and see a missile after it's been shot down by a Patriot missile. And the next video we're going to show you from a report I did about a week ago. The Kuwaiti Air Force also taking me out into the desert to show you one of these shot down missiles. That particular one was an Al-Fat missile made in Iraq by Iraq, None of the missiles that have been fired by Iraq so far have any chemical or biological weapons. But at this point, with today, this would be 13 missiles at least that Iraq has fired over to Kuwait. All of the missiles have either been shot down by Patriot missiles, by the Kuwaitis or the U.S., and they have either done that or they have fallen in the sea or the desert. Want to move now on to other news that has been very incredible from this part of the world, and that is the news of 1,000 U.S. Army paratroopers landing in northern Iraq as they go ahead and try to create a northern front. Our Brent Sadler is standing by there to tell us more about this operation. All right, apparently we don't have Brent Sadler right now. We're going to get more on that and those pictures, and I'm going to toss it back to Anderson and Carol. Back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Darren. We have other breaking news to tell you about from...
Yeah, that's right. Alessio Vinci, who's been with the Marine Expeditionary Unit near Nasiriyah, I believe, or somewhere in that area, joins us. Alessio, what can you tell us?
Hello to you, Anderson. Yes, the Marines unit here that I'm embedded with is basically covering the war on two fronts. On the one side, they're of course trying to keep the supply route here that drives through Nasiriyah open and secured, which means that they have to beef up the military presence here in the entire region to make sure that that supply remains open, and that U.S. commanders here are telling us that there are some pockets of resistance and some, especially some Saddam's Fedayeen who are trying to disrupt the operations here. So we are indeed hearing some sporadic fighting, but not any kind of heavy fighting that we were experiencing here during the first few days that we were here. On the other side, however, the Marines are also dealing with another huge problem, and that is the civilians. They're encountering hundreds of civilians every day trying to come back into town towards Nasiriyah to be able to, there are civilians leaving from the entire area here, from villages, surrounding villages. They're trying to go back into Nasiriyah, and the U.S. Marines are trying to prevent them from doing so because they're saying that Nasiriyah right now is a dangerous place. And so there is a very interesting exchange between the U.S. Marines and those civilians who are trying to go back home. Now, the other problem is that the Fedayeen, the Saddam Fedayeen, are mingling among those civilians, and so when the Marines are coming across large number of civilians, among them, they also find a large number of military, a large number of Fedayeen. According to one commander here, in the last couple of days, 200 members of the military, including Republican Guards officers, including Fedayeen, and including regular army soldiers, and among them, of course, 60 civilians. And the job of the U.S. military right now is to try to deal with those civilians, feed them, try to take care of them for a while, but they're trying to persuade them not to come here and to push them back towards their home. Now, of course, the problem, of course, is that when those civilians approach military checkpoints and the Fedayeen try to shoot at them, then the U.S. military has to respond with fire, and sometimes that causes some victims among the civilians, among the civilian population.
U.S. Marines in Iraq burying the body of a 6-year-old boy, his head facing Mecca, according to Muslim tradition. A casualty of a new kind of war, killed along with his father as their vehicle approached a Marine checkpoint at high speed. The man, Marines say, was an armed combatant. Marines say they want to avoid killing civilians, but they pose a threat, commanders say, because Iraqi paramilitary groups recruit them to run scouting missions in U.S.-controlled territory, often accompanied by young children.
Some of them have told us that they've been told you need to fight. If you don't fight, we'll do something to your family.
The danger, U.S. military officials say, is that paramilitary groups are conducting guerrilla-style warfare against U.S. positions.
I mean, we expect that, and we're ready for that. And they may want to train, and they're very well trained in guerrilla warfare. But we're very well trained in anti-guerrilla warfare as well. And we'll, if they want to come at us with that, we'll be waiting for them.
When possible, suspects are cuffed and taken in for questioning, or sometimes civilians are simply sent back from where they come from.
All right, no entry, road closed on this one.
And to minimize as much as possible contact between civilians and U.S. Marines, the military is putting up signs in Arabic warning the local population to stay away and remain in their homes.
And U.S. commanders here say that they do not know how many civilians may have been killed so far, but what they say is that they were surprised to see how, for example, in Nasiriyah during the early days of the battle when the war was raging on down there, they were surprised to see how many civilians, children, women and children were in the street, saying, one commander was telling me that clearly among some of the Iraqi military here, there are people who are not very much concerned about the fate of civilians. Back to you, Anderson.
Alessio, I'm just curious to know, and I don't know how much interaction you've been able to have with civilians, but what kind of feedback are you getting? What kind of reaction are the Marines there getting from the local population? I mean, you said civilians are coming back. Is that an indication that they are believing it's a more secure situation? Why are they coming back, and what kind of attitudes do they have toward the coalition forces?
Well, what happens is that Nasiriyah is a large city, about 250,000 people, and there are many villages, rural villages all around it. And what happened is that these civilians are trying to reach from their villages to go back into town, to see relatives, to see the doctors, to go about their business. You must understand that this is a country that has been at war for 10 years. And so for many civilians, for many of the people especially who live in remote areas, the presence of the military here in this region is nothing new. They may not even realize that this is an American military. They realize it once they get here. But they may hear gunshot, they might hear mortars, they might hear war going on. But for them, this is nothing new. And therefore, they approach those military checkpoints because they want to find out more. And they want to find out if they can go back to their homes, if they come from the city, or if they can go and see their relatives. I witnessed an exchange between one of the U.S. Marines and one of the civilians through an interpreter. He was saying, look, I have a problem with my kidney. I need to go and see the doctor. I can't sleep. Please let me go. And the U.S. Marine was telling, look, Nasiriyah right now is not safe. You cannot go back in there. So there is really as little, the U.S. Marines are trying to have as little contact as possible with the civilian population right now because they simply cannot deal with it. This is a forward unit. They cannot deal with feeding them, taking care of them, those who are wounded. They want as much as possible contain them and convince them that right now it is impossible to go back into Nasiriyah, and the best thing for them is to go back to their homes and their villages from where they come from.
And I guess, as you mentioned, all those civilians returning, it's a security problem because, as you mentioned, those Saddam Farayin fighters dressed in civilian clothes are infiltrating along with the civilian population, and it presents a challenge, I guess, for Marines to try to figure out who is a civilian, who is an enemy fighter. Alessio Vinci with the Marine Expeditionary Unit. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Carol?
We're going to take a quick break right now, but as we go to this break, we want to show you some more amazing pictures out of Kurdish-controlled northern Iraq as 1,000 U.S. paratroopers from the U.S. Army's 173rd Airborne Brigade stepped out of C-17s and parachuted into Kurdish-controlled areas. We'll be back with more on this right after this.
We're actually going to take these live pictures from Abu Dhabi TV just coming in. All right, this is actually Lebanese TV, LBC. Not exactly sure from where it is. This is trucks exploding in somewhere in southern Iraq. That's as far as we know right now. Literally, again, just getting these pictures in. These are being seen live right now on Lebanese TV. Not sure if they're actually live pictures or if they are taped pictures. They are live pictures, so this is happening right now, somewhere in southern Iraq. We'll be right back.
You don't drive a Model T, and you certainly don't use one of these to make a phone call. Then why sleep on an old-fashioned bed? Call now and learn how you can sleep on the bed designed for the 21st century, the Tempur-Pedic Swedish Sleep System, the only mattress that uses the gravity-defying Tempur material originally developed by NASA.
It feels like it's actually forming its own glove to me.
I can't really find an uncomfortable position.
It's like nothing I've ever felt before in a mattress.
We'll send you this free video, information kit, and free sample of the revolutionary Tempur material. Instead of uncomfortable metal springs, the Tempur-Pedic mattress uses billions of viscoelastic memory cells. This soft yet supportive material automatically adjusts to every curve of your body. Don't be fooled by imitators. Only the Tempur-Pedic mattress uses the revolutionary Tempur material originally developed by NASA. Call now and we'll rush you this video and information kit.
Let's take a look at what is happening at this hour across Iraq. Here are the latest war developments. An airfield in northern Iraq, you're seeing the pictures right here, now in the hands of the U.S. Army. Members of the Army's 173rd Airborne Brigade parachuted into the Kurdish-controlled area. Under the cover of darkness, the military will now begin flying troops and equipment to the field. Exclusive CNN pictures right there. Brent Sadler brought those back for us. On the southern side of the country, British forces say Iraqi fighters have taken up positions in civilian areas of Basra. Resistance stiffer than expected. The British are warning the battle for Basra could take weeks, maybe even months. Meanwhile, British aircraft bombed a column of about 70 Iraqi armored vehicles seen leaving Basra and heading south toward Qasr. Arab TV networks have shown video of a bombed marketplace in Baghdad. Iraqi officials say 15 people were killed in the strike. The Pentagon says it did not target the market. U.S. officials suggest a stray Iraqi anti-aircraft shell or missile could have hit the market. According to British officials, an investigation is underway. At the Pentagon, Joint Chiefs Vice Chairman General Peter Pace says Iraq has executed some prisoners of war. General Pace did not elaborate. Now, earlier, Pentagon sources told CNN they were looking into a report that Iraqi soldiers shot and killed 7 U.S. soldiers as they were surrendering with their hands up. And it's been 3 days since Newsday heard from a reporter and a photographer covering the war in Baghdad. You are seeing their pictures there. Newsday is investigating reports the two were expelled from Iraq and were escorted to the border of Syria or Jordan. A freelance photographer is also reported missing. 7 U.S. servicemen wounded from the war in Iraq arrived at a hospital on the southern coast of Spain today. They are among the first patients to be treated at the so-called Rapid Assembly Hospital, which opened last month under a bilateral agreement. Still more happening. President Bush and British Prime Minister Tony Blair will plot war strategy again today at Camp David. They're also expected to map out plans for humanitarian relief and a post-war Iraq. Mr. Blair favors a more prominent role for the UN than President Bush is said to. And back in Washington, lawmakers paused to remember one of their own. Veteran Democratic Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a legend, died yesterday following complications from an appendectomy. He had served in the Senate for 24 years, from 1977 to 2001. Daniel Patrick Moynihan dead at the age of 76. He will be buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery on Monday. And here's what's coming up in our coverage in the next hour. We'll give you the latest on the U.S. paratroopers who are now on the ground in northern Iraq. Plus, we're going to update you on the explosions at a Baghdad marketplace yesterday, find out what both Iraq and the U.S. are now saying about the blast. And we're going to take you across the border into Kuwait to see how Kuwaitis are reacting to war with our own Darren Kagan. CNN's war coverage continues right now.
And good morning to you, 4:41 Eastern Time, 12:41 Baghdad time. You're seeing a live picture from Baghdad, and you see the weather has cleared, which means that coalition forces will probably be at work again today. I'm Carol Costello.
And I'm Anderson Cooper. Thanks for watching our continuing coverage. We've been going at it all morning long. We've got a couple hours left to go, and there's a lot to cover what is going on right now in the war on Iraq.
Yeah, we want to give you a visual sense of where coalition forces are in Iraq right now. Most coalition forces on the ground are now in central and southern Iraq, but the U.S. military is also building up its northern front. 1,000 paratroopers are now on the ground in the north, securing a key airfield in the Kurdish-controlled zone. And top U.S. military officials say early reports that a large group of Republican Guard troops were heading south from Baghdad, and they appear to be based on inaccurate intelligence.
We have been hearing a lot from our Darren Kagan, who is in Kuwait City. There was apparently a Scud, excuse me, I should say some sort of missile attack on Kuwait, shot down at least by Patriot missiles. Darren Kagan has the latest on that, as well as the mood in Kuwait, where the abnormal, I suppose, has become normal. Darren?
Yeah, just something I'll make clear. It probably was not a Scud. Of all the missiles that have been launched at Kuwait over the last week and a half or so, none, according to the U.S. military, have been Scud missiles, and none have contained any biological or chemical weapons. Want to move on, actually, since we kind of covered the missile situation. As I said, a couple of Patriots fired up and they intercepted that missile. Let's move on then to a remarkable military maneuver, and you had just mentioned this in the last couple of moments, taking place in northern Iraq. It happened overnight. We're going to roll some video for you so you can get a sense of what it looked like in northern Iraq overnight. This is 1,000 Army paratroopers parachuting their way into the Kurdish-controlled area of Iraq. The soldiers are from the U.S. Army's 173rd Airborne Brigade. They parachuted to the ground, and then they walked across flat open fields. They're there to assemble in the new morning light. They began to secure the Harir airfield. It is not far from Basra. That's also where we find our Brent Sadler. He had the opportunity, I believe, to see these paratroopers as they fell from the night sky and tell us more about what their mission is now that they're on the ground and how they're going to make that happen. Brent, hello.
Hello, Darren. Yes, indeed. We've been out for most of the night trying to work out where these 1,000 paratroopers had dropped. And indeed, we came across them shortly after daybreak at Harir Airfield. Quite an incredible scene to see the paratroopers come across the drop zone several square miles in width and really beginning to assemble and to secure their perimeter. So I just simply came from my observation post, walked across the fields to them and introduced myself. Good morning, Platoon Sergeant Brent Sadler from CNN. Good morning.
Sergeant Geringer.
Welcome to Iraq.
Thank you.
How was it? Tell me, please. The parachute drop overnight?
Parachute drop was well. Everything went according to plan. Planes came in, dropped us off, just like how we normally do business.
Yes, indeed, like they normally do business. We know from the comments they gave me there that the paratroopers had dropped from a height of about 1,200 feet. Now that means they're floating down in that pitch black for less than a minute. About 45-50 seconds, they were telling me, with their heavy weights strapped beneath them and then hitting the ground with a thud after hearing their canopies snap open immediately after exiting those aircraft. Now, 1,000 of them were dropped into the Kurdish territory in 10 sticks, as it's called in military jargon. That's 100 per stick, 10 aircraft, 1,000 paratroopers very quickly deployed in this area. Speed is the essence, and getting all the paratroopers out of the aircraft onto the ground in one piece is the aim of the mission. That was accomplished. We've had 2 days of heavy rain here, so they had a soft landing. A couple of troopers told me they were surprised there wasn't sand, surprised to see snow on the mountains either side of the Harir airfield, and thankful that they were down in one piece with just a few bumps and scrapes in some cases. And really their main problem was getting rid of the mud which had caked on their faces, on their legs and on their weapons. There's not really been much interaction yet with the airborne brigade and the local Kurdish fighters here, but expect to have liaison and coordination building in the days ahead. Now, shortly after we found those paratroopers and took those exclusive pictures, we then heard from my colleague CNN's Ben Wiedemann that in these mountains behind me over there, those rolling hills over there rather, where the Iraqi front lines are, there had been yet another day of airstrikes, 4 huge explosions, puffs of smoke on that ridge line, another day of softening up targets on those Iraqi frontline positions. So we now have the first deployment of significant numbers of visible ground forces here in Kurdish territory. Expect those numbers to build to several thousand in the days ahead. Also expect, I'm told from Kurdish sources, to see heavy transport aircraft come into that airfield, which has now been secured by the airborne brigade, the 173rd, and expect to see heavier equipment, armored personnel carriers and more weaponry coming in. So really a lot more activity now on this northern front. Back to you, Darren.
Couple quick questions for you here, Brent. First of all, they're there, the paratroopers are there to secure that Harir airfield, but what is the shape of that airfield, and is it any shape to receive the kind of planes that need to bring in the heavy equipment now?
Yes, surprisingly, it is absolutely in very good shape. The airstrip was built in the early 1980s by Saddam Hussein, but it's actually never been used. I've been on the runway myself expecting this deployment at any day, and so I've driven along the runway. It's in good shape. It's almost a couple of miles long. It's big enough to take heavy military transporters. It's got a parking apron where now the paratroopers and special forces, 2 helicopters were also on the ground there as I saw the paratroopers come in. And so there is enough space to move men and equipment there fairly rapidly. A flow of men and equipment can be expected to come through there. And it's no surprise that this is happening. The Kurds were telling me several days ago to expect this Plan B to come into operation, that the Plan A, a deployment of plus 60,000 troops coming to here from Turkey, had been put aside because of complications with Ankara. Now Plan B going into effect at the same time as we're seeing daily now attacks by coalition warplanes against Saddam Hussein's northern defensive line. 3 army corps up there, 120,000 Iraqi army troops hold that line, a 500-mile line, this is just the beginning of Plan B now taking shape. Darren.
Incredible pictures from northern Iraq, bringing new meaning, I guess, Brent, to thanks for dropping in. Much wanted, much awaited, much anticipated, these paratroopers and this coalition presence in northern Iraq on behalf of the Kurdish people. Brent Sadler in northern Iraq, thank you so much. As I toss it back to Anderson and Carol, I'm going to mention we're getting word about that CENTCOM briefing that now has been delayed. We're getting word that will take place at 7 a.m. Eastern. Of course, whenever it does begin, you'll see it live right here on CNN. For now, I'm going to toss it back to Atlanta.
All right, thanks a lot, Darren. There was a really interesting CENTCOM briefing that we covered a couple hours ago from British Air Marshal who basically blasted Al Jazeera, the Arab language network, for airing video purported to show 2 British soldiers lying dead. It was quite a briefing.
Certainly was.
A lot of stuff came out.
We're going to be talking a lot more about that. Right now, we're going to toss it back to Martin Savage, embedded with the Marines. Martin, what do things look like from your perspective?
Well, Carol, we wanted to show you this, really it's sort of a roadside rest on the way north for the U.S. military and specifically the Marines. Tactically, it is known as a tactical assembly area. Take a look out here. This is the perimeter. Marines are experts at digging. Digging in is something that they do first and foremost when they reach a position. The assembly area here is really a parking lot, a temporary one that is set up for military vehicles, set up for the men. It is a place where they can refuel, refit, repair, and get some much-needed rest and also have food as well. So in some respects, it is a down area, a rest area, but also obviously being in Iraq in the middle of a war, it's got to be a very secure area. That's why you've got the perimeter being dug in over there. This shows you more of what the setup looks like. There's literally dozens and dozens and dozens, probably more than that, of military vehicles, everything from armored personnel carriers. There's also aviation assets that are here, helicopters flying out of here, medical unit. This is all that is something that can be set up very quickly and can be taken apart very quickly. And this is not necessarily permanent. It is just a base of operations for the short term, and then you pick up and you move everything on. Speaking of foxholes, this is our foxhole. We had to dig that last night. We are not such exceptional diggers that it is that deep. Normally ours are much more shallow than that, but we had the help of a backhoe thanks to the Marines. So it's another indication that supplies are moving in. And you can see by the young Marines over here, it is a well-needed rest for many of them. They have been going hard at it almost 24 hours a day. So this is a chance for a few hours to try to catch up. But they know they're going to be moving on again. They may not know what the objective is going to be, but they know they will be moving soon. And one other thing about the landscape we're in, you may see it in the background here. I think it's very arid, almost looks like the Bonneville Salt Flats. That is not the case the way it was until, let's say, just the very end of the last Gulf War. This was marshland. This was wetland. This was very much very green and full of water. Evidence of that I hold in my hand is that you can see these are shells here, freshwater snail shells. So what am I getting at? Well, the whole story from military commanders to us is that after the war in retribution here, Saddam Hussein basically had all the water channeled out, drained the wetlands in a strike back against what are called the marsh Arabs, who had been sympathetic against the Saddam Hussein regime. And as a result of that, what used to be very lush, very wet, is now just plain desert once more, and military authorities say it is just one more on a long list of atrocities that Saddam Hussein has carried out. We have no way exactly to verify that, but we do hold the shells in our hand. Carol?
Martin, I wanted to ask you more about that foxhole that you dug, because you actually slept in that overnight, didn't you?
Well, it depends. Some nights we sleep in them. Some nights we sleep right next to them. They're not the most comfortable thing. There's 4 of us that have to fit inside there, and if we slept in that one, we'd be curled up pretty tight. There have been other nights, though, where, yes, we do sleep inside of them. You lay your sleeping bag down. The very first night, when we got out to the departure area, that is the staging area where the troops were being massed, in northern Kuwait, we arrived after sunset and saw the Marines digging in. We got out our shovel. I drove it into the soil, and it bounced right back at me. I mean, that soil was as hard as a New York City sidewalk. And for the next 2 hours, we scraped, dug, and cursed our way about 8 inches into the soil, which was barely enough to lay down, but at least if there was a Scud missile or some sort of artillery barrage, we'd have some form of shelter. Some of the Marines that night dug for 8 hours straight, got an hour of sleep, and then picked up and moved on, only to dig again.
I know, and then all they have to eat are those MREs. I just don't know how you guys keep going out there.
Well, the meals are actually pretty good. MREs are, of course, the military food. This is prepackaged food. And the menus are improved. In fact, they've improved them from the last time I had them, which was in Afghanistan. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, this is what we're talking about here as we hold up item number A. And this one is chicken with noodles. It's not a favorite of mine, not a favorite of the group. But they've also improved them with such things as vanilla cappuccino that you get, or strawberry and chocolate milkshakes and vanilla milkshakes. So they have, oh, and I'm sorry, my cameraman Scotty's reminding me of the #1 big hit that is new on the menu, a hamburger, which is essentially 2 slices of sort of wheat bread and a hamburger patty that goes in the middle, and you get barbecue sauce and then smother it with cheese spread.
Oh.
And by golly, when you've been out here for a while, it's pretty good. Pretty good indeed.
Well, I suppose if you're hungry, anything tastes good.
Very hard to find.
Yeah. You know, Marty, things seem so calm there.
It does. It does.
Calm there now, but it wasn't so calm overnight, was it?
No, well, last night was relatively quiet. The night before, as we explained, and others have reported about this, the attacks that have been taking place along the supply line goes all the way back to northern Kuwait. That's some distance now. And it's the main artery that brings in all the ammunition, brings in the food, brings in the fuel, and brings in the follow-up troops. That makes the fighting force. And of course, because it is spread along such a long distance, it's vulnerable at times. And the Fedayeen, which are these militias that have been striking against that supply line, have been more a harassment, not a major problem according to the military. But they have been striking at the convoy. So now the focus has been on trying to secure those lines. The military knows they're vital. And we went out on one such operation to protect a shipment of 250,000 gallons of fuel. And we were warned as we went down the route that we could expect some fire, and that's exactly what we got. A lot of small arms fire, sometimes very heavy, focused on the armored personnel carriers, rocket-propelled grenades. One of them just narrowly missed the vehicle that the CNN crew rides in. And there was a lot of shooting that was going on, and a lot of confusion because it was pitch dark that night. Night vision goggles don't work when there is no illumination. So there were armored personnel carriers running into each other. We got struck at least 3 times. Once we ran into a house, another time we ran into a Humvee, and then another time an armored vehicle backed into us, and you are literally thrown around there like a tennis shoe in the dryer. You just get bounced around, which is how I ended up with a mark on my nose. But it was a wild night. However, as a result of the heavy firepower that U.S. forces poured on, they say they saw nothing last night. And that's part of their strategy. Hit hard when you were attacked and send the message. Don't do it again.
Well, we're glad you're
Apparently for the last 24, that has worked.
Yeah, we're glad you're safe and sound. Martin Savage, thanks for joining us. We've got to run now because we've got Becky Diamond on the line.
Martin Savage, just awesome.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have Becky Diamond now. We're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we will.
All right.
Maybe I didn't love
When Anne Murray sings a classic country song, it's unforgettable.
I fall.
Presenting Anne Murray, Country Croonin'.
I can't stop love.
30 timeless country classics.
Put your sweet lips a little closer.
These are Anne's favorite classic country songs.
Are you lonesome tonight?
Get Anne Murray, Country Croonin' on 2 CDs or cassettes.
Make the world go away.
You'll treasure this collection forever.
I bless the day I found you.
Please call now.
Call 1-800-306-5300 to order Anne Murray on 2 CDs or 2 cassettes for just $24.99 plus shipping. Or send check or money order to the address on your screen. Call now.
CNN Today, overnight developments of battles with live reports from the front lines, plus one U.S. Marine's mother's surprising personal battle against the war on the next American Morning with Paul Zahn. CNN Today, 7 a.m. Eastern.
Well, Earlier this morning from CENTCOM, we learned that the delivery of humanitarian aid to the port in Qasr may be delayed as much as 24 hours, may not happen until Friday. This because 2 mines were discovered and detonated in the waters near Qasr. For the latest, we go to Becky Diamond, who is with the Australians patrolling those waters. Becky, what does things look like this morning?
Well, possible mines have been detected in the waterway leading to Qasr. And pardon the chopper in the background, I apologize for the noise. So mines have been detected, and they're sending out minesweepers now to take a look at what those objects might be. And that's in the waterway itself, not in the port of Qasr. That's in the KA waterway leading from the Persian Gulf up to the port town of Qasr. Now, the Sir Galahad was expected to have arrived yesterday. It was supposed to pass through this waterway, and then we were told it was supposed to arrive today. Now it's being pushed back again because of this threat. Anderson?
All right, Becky, thanks very much. Just to remind our viewers, the Sir Galahad has about some 200 or so tons of humanitarian aid, food, water, medicines, stuff donated both by the British government and by the Kuwaiti government. Was, as Becky reported, supposed to get there anytime today. Actually, is what the figure we had been told. We had been told sometime on Thursday. It looks now like that's going to be delayed at least 24 hours, according to the British. Becky Diamond reporting live from the waterways with the Australians. Thanks very much.
Okay,
Carol?
and with that, we start our next hour.
They are targeting accurately the enemy. This is something that increased the resistance in the Muthanna area. And another citizen, his name is Ayed Dihri. Ayed Dihrib. He managed to hit and damage a helicopter near the Ahmed area. Ayed Dihrib managed to hit a helicopter, and maybe you'll see some videos of that helicopter soon. In another area in Najaf, the enemy forces targeted civilian areas in the outskirts of Najaf. And until yesterday, and the day before yesterday, and yesterday evening too, their bombardment caused 60 injuries and 26 martyrs. They bombed civilian neighborhoods, and those cowards used cluster bombs. They were met with resistance by Fidaiyu Saddam, or fighters, and the citizens of the area. They retreated from Al-Kufa and Al-Manadira. They ran away. They were shelled by the armed forces and by the Ba'ath Party forces and Fidai Saddam, and they had some were killed and some were injured after they retreated to the desert south of the Sea of Najaf. They tried to enter from another area in the south, but they were met again with resistance, and they retreated again and left for over 50 kilometers south of Najaf.
تكون الحملة التي قام بها علوج الأمريكان والبريطانيين
So the campaign that was targeted Najaf resulted in a failure, and they retreated. This is the latest information in these both fronts. I have to clarify, we noticed that the Americans, some of the administrations and some of the military officials, about